Well, in Jesus' time, and even before that, the ones who were suffering the most were the farmers, the shepherds. They were the poor people in that society. And they were working really hard, and the payment that they were getting was very low. So basically, they had enough just to eat, they and their families. But the work that they were doing, it was very hard. Like for the farmers, when they had to farm the land, there were a lot of rocks that they had to remove. And then the tools that they have were very old. I mean, they barely could do the work. It was a very hard work, and they were working for long hours. And then when we hear the first reading today, that's in the context of before the Babylonian exile. So that's when Babylonia conquered Israel, and some of the people of Israel, they were deported to Israel, to Babylon, and they are taken, especially the craftsmen. They were the ones who were taken, and they were there for about 75 years. So some of them, they were able to make their living in Babylon. So they were hard workers. They succeeded. They were able to do well. So they are the ones who stay in Babylon. They didn't return. But the ones, the children of the ones who were deported that didn't succeed, they are the ones who were able to return to Israel. And when they went back, they find out that what they owned before was taken by somebody else. Their lands, their properties, everything was taken. So now they had to be hired by these new owners who committed all kind of abuses against them. They oppressed them, they exploited them, and they were just suffering. And that's the context that we hear the first reading. That's when the prophet comes and he's preaching this good news to them. They never saw a banquet. The banquet, they were having feasts sometimes, but they were not having banquets like the rich people. They could spend their money on having these big banquets. So that's why we hear the prophets telling them about this banquet. It is going to be for everyone. So the Lord will take care of them, and they will be part of this banquet that is to come. That's what the Lord has promised, where everybody will have their fill, everyone will be happy. And that was when the prophet spoke, it was on the 5th century before Christ. And then after 5 centuries, they still pondering, what is it that God is going to fulfill His promise? He has promised this feast, this banquet, where everybody will be happy. It has been 5 centuries and it hasn't happened yet. So they are waiting for that moment. And that's when Jesus comes. That's the time when Jesus comes. And that's what we hear in the gospel today, the parable about this banquet. So the promise of God is about to be fulfilled. And that's why we hear the parable about this king who throws a banquet to celebrate his son's wedding. So he puts everything, the best in this banquet, because he wants his people to be fulfilled, happy. So everyone is invited. The first one that are invited are the religious leaders, because these were the people of God. But they are the ones who refused. They didn't listen to the prophets, the servants that the masters sent. They mistreated them. To some they killed, and they didn't listen. So, but everyone is invited. The king is the one who is taking care of this banquet. So no one has to bring anything. Everything is for free. The problem is that sometimes they want to take ownership, and that's when the problem starts. You want to take ownership or something, and that's the old world, the world that the people of Israel were suffering, the world of oppression where someone wants to be taking advantage, taking the lead. So all these problems come because they want to remain in the same way that was before. So the world of oppression, exploiting the poor, and that's not what the Lord wants. He is the owner, and He gives everything for free. So He wants everyone to participate in this banquet. And then the next ones that are invited are the wealthy ones, the ones who have power. And when they're invited to participate in this, they refuse because they had their own business. They had to take care of their business. So they don't have time, and they are too busy. And then when the Lord sends for the second time the servants, they mistreat them, they kill them, and they didn't listen to them. And I think that's what's still happening today. Especially when we see injustice, we see people suffering because others have the power, and the ones who have the power are not helping the ones who sometimes do not have power. The injustice. And when someone speaks up against that, what happened to that person? Well, that person can be mistreated, can even be put to death. So because they are saying this is not right, you are to take care of one another. And we see the prophets in the Old Testament. We see the prophets today also that they have suffered because they are saying the truth. And that's why they have been put to death or mistreated. So that's the people that we see today. There was a story about this man who, he goes to the church, and he's in the church, and he gives his testimony, and he said, he's at the front at the ambo, and he says, well, the Lord has blessed me so much. He said, I'm a wealthy man because of the Lord. And then he tells his story. He said, when I was younger, I was starting to work, I was starting to succeed. And then a missionary came, and he was talking about his mission, and he asked us to help his mission. So I knew it, that I had to do everything that I can to help that mission. So I decided to give everything that I had to the mission. So I just gave it away, and then the blessing of the Lord came, and now I am a millionaire. And then he gets off, he goes and sit with the people, and then there's a lady that she tells him and says, she whispers and says, well, I challenge you to do it again now that you're a millionaire. So sometimes on the way we forget that everything that we have is a gift from God. So God has given us everything. And we are to share, and we are to take care of one another. That's the mission that we have. And sometimes on the way we forget that we are to share what we have, especially with those who are in greater need. So that's what the gospel is telling us today. There is another story. This past week we were at the priest convocation. There was a bishop from Chicago who came, and he was saying a lot of stories. But one of the stories that I don't forget is that he said one day he was working with the poor in Chicago, and he was just there walking in this neighborhood, very poor neighborhood. And then he had his collar, and there was this woman who came to him and said, Father, please give me a blessing. And he asked, why do you want a blessing? And she said, because look at me. I cannot take it anymore. Look at my arms, all these needle marks. I cannot do it anymore. I cannot be living like this. I want to quit living like this. So I need your blessing. And then he asked and says, well, what are you planning to do? And she said, well, I want to go back to my family. I have my family in this place, so I'm hoping that they will help me. And the bishop said, well, let me give you some money so you can go to them. And she was like, no, I don't want your money. All what I want is your blessing. No, I want God to help me to get out of this. And that's the mission that we have as well. We have to bring people back to the banquet. And in the banquet is where they can find peace. They can find community. They can find what they need. We are to be these people that we could welcome everyone to this banquet. So we are to be there for them. That's what the gospel is telling us. And then we see that those who refuse, the king sees that they refuse. The religious leaders, those who were in power, refuse. So he sends his servants. And these servants this time is you and me. And the servants, they had to go to the alleys, to the place where they can find people, very simple people, the crippled, the ones who are suffering, the ones who are struggling. And then the gospel is telling us the good and bad alike. So everyone needs to be invited. So it can be those who are good, who are in church already. It can be those who are drug dealers. It can be those who are robbers, those who are prostitutes. Everyone is invited. We are to invite these people to the banquet. And we might be surprised because we hear in the gospel that there was one that was not wearing the wedding garment. And we say, well, I mean, the people came from the very ordinary, poor people were the ones who responded and went to the banquet. Nobody was wearing a wedding garment. What is the wedding garment that the gospel is talking about? The wedding garment is the lion cloth. That's the one that Jesus was wearing. That's the way that we see him in the crucifix. And that's what the slaves were wearing at that time. And you remember the Last Supper, he removes his tunic and he stays on his lion cloth. And that's the way that he starts washing the feet of his disciples. That's the wedding of the Christian, in the sense that we are to never forget that we are to serve people, that we are to be there for them. That's the mission that we have. We are to wash their feet. In other words, we are to serve them, to love them, to welcome them. That's what Jesus did. And that's the cloth of the Christian. That's what we are called to do. We ask the Lord to help us to acknowledge our mission, and to fulfill it. The ones who were thrown, the one who didn't have to wear the garment and was thrown away, where there is the grinding of teeth, the wailing and grinding of teeth. Who are that person? Well, they are the ones who they were not able to recognize the call of God, the ones who say no, who didn't respond to the call. And then at the end of their lives, they are just desperate because they say, I have wasted my life. I was never loved. I never was able to love. And that's the suffering that they had to endure, that they wasted their life, that they were not able to embrace the gospel. And that's the suffering that they will face. So we ask the Lord to help us, that we may always listen to His word, be part of this community, of this banquet, and that we may always bring the people to the banquet where everybody will be rejoice and will be able to be happy as well. That's where we find happiness in the Lord. Amen.